Okay, so we need this book. We actually need to finish. Just a couple of pointers here. It says here, the Torah makes one liable for a malacha when it comprises three inherent aspects of purpose and intention. If one didn't realize that one was doing a malacha, or that it was Shabbos, but performed the activity in a purposeful manner, the Torah makes one liable for a sin offering. Nowadays, this form of atonement doesn't exist, but this doesn't diminish from the importance of cessation from malacha. If a malacha is not done in a purposeful manner, it must still be avoided according to rabbinic law. There are instances, however, when references to the following principles appear in the text to explain why a certain activity may be permitted under specific circumstances. Okay, let's just do two of them, then because there are quite a few here. Just use the first two. Okay, an important note. Assumptions cannot be made on the basis of these principles since their definitions have been simplified here. So we'll just do the first two. Full liability is incurred when the malacha is done completely. For example, carrying includes the starting, moving, and stopping of an article. Although performing any of these must be avoided, it is a Torah prohibition only if these actions have taken place. And the second principle, which incurs full liability, it says when an act is for a purpose similar to that of which took place in the construction of the Mishkan. For example, in preparation of the Mishkan, the purpose of digging was for plowing the for the purpose of plowing the land. If one were to dig to obtain soil for covering another surface, the malacha is not for itself. Okay, but I wouldn't do digging anywhere on Shabbos. Even if it's something to us doesn't seems like you're breaking Shabbos anyway. Even if is permissible, I would never do such a thing. I think none of us would anyway.
Unless you end up digging a chick.
Gavin, you spilled. I said, did you dig those two things that I said, Gavin?
I dug them as well, 100%. And don't forget about Doug's fish around the corner from me. All right, let's carry on.
Okay, and on that note, thank you, Kabb. Let's hit to the Gemara. Give me 1 sec. I'm going to share my screen. It would be nice if the actual page ever came up on time, but it's my technology.
You want to do extra tonight? If you want to.
I want to try and avoid it if possible. Let's try and see if we can go within the time. I'm trying my best. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly do a repeat. Gavin, would you like to read it quickly?
I'm cleaning my glasses. Let Kevin read it.
Okay, Kev, read.
Okay.
I'll do the next one.
The Mishnah defines the degree to which one must supervise his sheep to prevent it from damaging another's property. One who brought a sheep into a fold and locked the gate before it properly, but it escaped and damaged the property of another, he is not liable to pay for the damage. If, however, he did not lock the gate before it properly and it escaped and damaged, he is liable to pay. If the fold, was breached at night, or robbers breached it, and the sheep escaped and damaged, he is not liable. But if the robbers took it out, the robbers are liable. If he left the sheep in the sun, or gave it over to a deaf, mute, a deranged person, or a minor, and it escaped and damaged, the owner is liable. But if he gave it over to a shepherd, the shepherd assumes the responsibility for the animal in his place. If it fell into a garden and benefited from the produce there, the owner pays for what it benefited. But if it went down to the garden in its usual manner and damaged there, the owner pays for what it damaged. The Mishnah cites a dispute as to how such damages are assessed. How does the owner pay for what it damaged? We appraise how much base se'ah in a field was worth before it was damaged, and how much it is worth now. The owner must pay the difference. Rav Shimon says, if it ate ripe produce, he pays the value of ripe produce. Thus, if the volume of the consumed produce was a se'ah, he pays for a se'ah. If 2 se'ahs, he pays for 2 se'ahs.
Okay, good. Well read. Perfect, actually. Lovely. All right. So that's the Mishnah, that the chapter that we're on. I'm just going to do a quick revision as far as the Gemara is concerned, because what happens with the Gemara is it basically goes from the top of the Mishnah and analyzes it and goes down. So I don't want to address issues that are going to occur later in the Mishnah when we've got a very limited period of time. Let's just go through piece by piece. All right, so the Mishnah taught that one who locks the gate properly is exempt for any damage his animal causes should it escape. So the Gemara wants to define the word. What does properly mean? So the rabbis taught in a brisa what is properly and what is improperly. A gate that can stand in a normal wind, that is guarding it properly. A gate that cannot stand in a normal wind, that is guarding it improperly. So what we said is that if a gate is able to withstand a usual wind, that refers to a level of guarding under which the animal remains secured in normal common circumstances. Okay? Now, it emerges that our Mishnah requires only a lesser level of guarding. Okay, so what does this mean, a lesser level of guarding? Well, just because it's considered proper guarding doesn't mean it is the optimum guarding. It's the minimum standard, guys. The use of a gate that can withstand no more than a common wind comes under the category of a lesser guarding. Because we learned in the 45th daf that there are two levels of guarding. Shmira Pechuta, which is a lesser guarding, and that's the standard way in which people watch their animals or any other hazard. And this suffices to prevent it from causing damage in normal circumstances, like, expected situations. But it's very different from a Shmira Ma'ula, which is known as a superior guarding. So that's like Fort Knox. It can prevent damage even in unusual circumstances. Gale force winds, 5 or 6 animals kicking the door to pieces. It's like Alcatraz, okay? It ain't nothing going to happen. And one who guards a hazard in a lesser manner can't be accused of negligence because it's normal circumstances. So you've taken what you call adequate or minimal precautions. But in some cases, a superior method is required to exempt him from liability. So we know Rabbi Meir's point of view, that is, especially if an animal is considered to be, and especially Rav Eliezer, is considered to be muad. There's no question, as far as that's concerned, that that animal is more prone to want to kick the door down. So you have to take precautions. But we're going to also learn how they say you're as responsible for a lesser guarding. What we battle with is our Mishnah, because Rav Mani Bar Patish is making a suggestion. What did he say? Which Tana maintains that a lesser guarding suffices for a muad, as we learned in a Mishnah in 45b. And I'm going to share the screen and show you which Mishnah I'm actually talking about here. I think it's the best way to show you. Okay, I know we did touch on it yesterday, but obviously I just wanted to sort out and tie all the loose ends. No pun intended, Kevin. So, Gavin, now that your glasses are fixed, would you do us the honor, sir, of reading on?
Just plugging in something. Give me a second.
Sure.
Sorry. If excuse me, if a person takes measures to prevent his animal from doing damage, but he nevertheless damages, he is exempt from liability. The Mishnah discusses the level of prevention necessary to qualify for this exemption. If the owner tied the ox with a rein or locked, sorry, I'm just fluish here. If its owner tied the ox with a rein or locked the gate before it properly, but he went out and damaged, whether it is tam or a muad, the owner is liable. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, if it is a tam, the owner is indeed liable, as you say. However, if it is a muad, he is exempt, because it is stated regarding a muad and its owner did not guard it. whereas this one was guarded. Rabbi Eliezer says the muad has no means of guarding except the knife.
Okay, good. So just to reiterate a couple of points, Gav, thank you very much. That was well read. Is if you had a look, if the owner tied it with the rein or locked it with the gate before it properly, but it went out and damaged with it, was a tamul muad, he is liable. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. So what does it mean? Properly means a gate capable of withstanding normal winds. That's all it means, guys. Not hurricanes, not an animal kicking the door down. Normal situation. Normal winds for that climate in that area. That's what Rashi says, okay? And he actually mentions it in our daf, funny enough. Similarly, a rein is capable of restraining an ox under normal conditions. So both the gate and the rein qualify as a lesser guarding. And what's a lesser guarding? An ordinary guarding. Doesn't mean it's standard. It's minimum standard, right? But Rabbi Meir maintains that in order to be exempt, the owner must guard it in a superior manner. In other words, he must tie the ox with an iron chain. Okay, not a normal leather rein or strap or whatever the case may be, an iron chain. And then the ox, by all reasonable expectations, is incapable of breaking. It doesn't matter how hard it pulls and thrashes. And if you're going to look and create a special sort of structural door, the lock has to be able to withstand powerful storms, even if it's uncommon. So in other words, the owner who secures his ox with a leash of just ordinary strength or behind a door capable of withstanding only normal winds is liable if the ox gets out and damaged. Does that make sense? Yeah. Now, as far as Rabbi Yehuda is concerned, a lesser guarding is required for a muad, but not for a tam. A tam requires a superior guarding. Now, why did we say that was odd, guys?
Because you think you'd rather place it for a muad as opposed to a tam, because the muad is far more dangerous.
Yeah.
Okay, you cut off in that last sentence, Gavin, with your connection. Just repeat.
I don't know if this works that well. Right? I said that it's very strange because you would think that a tam ox it doesn't have the propensity generally to attack. So there's no need for a superior guarding for a tam ox, you would think. And you would think for a muad ox that a superior guarding is would be written in the Torah as a it would be guaranteed regardless.
Correct. So that's a perfect answer. Is that a tame animal? You would think if you need a superior guarding for a tame animal, even more so for an animal that has the owner has been warned about of being dangerous. Arthur, are you on mute or not? Because who's banging pots? Okay. So as far as that's concerned, that makes sense. And then that last part is Rav Eliezer is the most stringent. What did he say? Is that it has no means of guarding except the knife, guys. What does that mean?
Shechter.
What?
Shechter, the animal.
Yeah, but what about shechting the animal? What do you mean?
No, because it's so dangerous that you shouldn't actually keep it. Once it's muad, straight away you should send it to the abattoir to get slaughtered. Straight away. It shouldn't be guarded because shouldn't need a guard because it's dead.
Okay, so he's saying that. He's saying even more than that. He said, listen, I don't care if you stuck the thing in Alcatraz. If it does any damage, you have to pay the person back. And it actually doesn't sound that unreasonable. I know it's the most stringent, but it doesn't sound unreasonable if your property was damaged by that ox. You would say to the person, I don't care how you looked after it, it damaged. How could you have looked after it? Even with a superior guarding, pay me what you damaged. So if you're the damaged party, Rav Eliezer makes sense. Rabbi Meir is now also saying that it requires a superior guarding for both tam and muad, and Rav Yehuda is saying that it needs a superior guarding for tam, but not for muad. Okay. Now, without that, that's a summary of what we've done so far. I'm not going to go back to the 45th daf and explain to you their reasonings. I'm just going to give you the bottom line. Is that you mustn't think that according to Rav Yehuda that you would pay half payment damages for tam with a superior guarding, and now if you've got a lesser guarding for muad, you don't pay anything. There's no ways you could be better off with the muad doing damage if the court had warned you than you would with the tam where you had no warning. That's absolutely illogical. So what it's saying, and what actually was proposed by Rav Ada bar Ahava, said, look, the logic is as follows, is that Rabbi Yehuda said that when you pay tam, you pay half payment damages from the body of the attacking animal, and the muad portion, you pay the rest in cash. So if you've got a lesser guarding, you still pay for the tam portion because you're not off the hook on the tam portion. You need a superior guarding, which is half payment damages. The only thing you're off the hook with a lesser guarding, or should we use the word ordinary guarding, is the muad portion of making up the shortfall. That's all he's saying. Does that make sense, guys? Based on logic. Whereas the other rabbis say, look, you're either paying half payment damages from the body of the attacking animal or full payment damages from choice property, but you're not paying the balance. You're not paying the balance of the money for muad from choice property in the first part from the body of the attacking animal. Does that make sense? That's where he differs from the rest of the rabbis. Fine. Now that we've got that point, let's go on to this new Gemara that we're dealing with. So Rav Mani bar Patish said, which Tana maintains that a lesser guarding suffices for a muad? It's Rabbi Yehuda, as we learned in the Mishnah. Because the Mishnah starts, if the owner tied the ox with a rein or locked the gate before it properly, but it went out and damaged, whether it was a tam or muad, the owner is liable. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. If it is a tam, the owner is liable. However, if it is a muad, he is not liable because it's stated and its owner did not guard it. So it means that basically in the Shemot chapter 21, verse 36, Exodus, there seems to be a leniency that if you guard it in a lesser manner, you're not liable. Okay, that's how he arrives at it with the Gezerah Shava. But the reality is, whereas this one was guarded, Rav Eliezer says, so when it says this one, it means this verse. In other words, it's stated regarding a muad implies that as long as the owner guards it, even in a lesser manner, he's not liable. That's how it teaches the interpretation. Rav Eliezer said it has no means of guarding except the knife, meaning that even if you do a superior guarding, you're fully liable. It doesn't matter how well you've looked after the animal. For damages, you pay. So you might as well shecht it, because otherwise this animal is going to cost you money. If it's muad, it's already at a bad nature. So the Gemara reflects Rav Mani's assertion that our Mishnah reflects the opinion of Rav Yehuda. Because the Gemara say, look, you can say that it follows even Rabbi Meir. Why? Because he stated his opinion in regard to keren damage, whereas shein and regal damage are different, for the Torah reduces the level of guarding required in their case. Well, why do you think, guys?
Because those are natural. It's not going, it's normal movement, it's normal walking, it's normal, it's the run of the mill of what these animals, oxen, do.
Okay, but why would that get you off the hook? You're close, but I want to know why that would get you off the hook.
What, for keren or for the others?
No, Gav. What the Gemara is proposing here is that it's saying that even Rabbi Meir would say in the case of a regal and shein damage, regal means damage with the body of the animal or trampling over something with its feet that belongs to somebody else. And shein is consumption damage, where it either ate something or it rubbed its body to scratch an itch and satisfy an itch. Those two damages, even if it's muad, require a lesser guarding, and that the only time that Rabbi Meir says that a superior guarding is required is in the case of keren. Okay?
Yeah.
So what this Gemara is proposing is that it's not necessarily a case where the Gemara agrees with Rav Yehuda. Because here we're talking about sheep, guys. There's no mention of an ox in this Mishnah at all. So this Mishnah, if it's talking about sheep, can't be talking about keren damage, because every example of keren damage that we've learned has to be with an ox, because it's got a horns. Okay? Right. Sheep aren't going to really cause damage, etc. We're not talking about a male goat with horns. We're talking sheep. So it's not really going to do anything to you. So Kev, you're falling asleep. So what we're saying here is, look, the Mishnah itself, Kevin, isn't mentioning ox. So it's not talking about keren damage. It could only be talking about shane damage and regal damage. Okay, so therefore, who's to say that this Mishnah necessarily agrees with Rabbi Yehuda? Because this Gemara, Rav Mani Bar Patish, is basically saying, look, this Mishnah agrees with Rabbi Yehuda because it's saying that for a lesser guarding, it suffices if it's muad. And the Gemara is saying, yes, it's a lesser guarding suffices if it's muad. Even Rabbi Meir could agree with it if it's shane or regal. But as far as keren damage is concerned, only Rav Yehuda says a lesser guarding suffices. But because we're talking about sheep and there's no mention of keren, who's to say that this Mishnah is by Rabbi Yehuda, or in agreement with Rabbi Yehuda? That's the question. Okay. Kev, you want to give over the question to me just so I see you guys got it?
The question.
You're talking about this with the sheep. Relating to the sheep, Damon.
I know you were counting sheep as you were sleeping.
No, it was only probably a few seconds.
No, but you know what? Everybody told me that when I couldn't sleep, I need to count sheep. And I know you fell asleep, not because I'm boring, but because you were counting sheep. Okay.
You think I'm quite sheepish today, Damon? Is that the question? Is it
okay, I want you
what we just discussed?
Yeah, but I want you to word it over in a sentence or two very simply. It's a very simple question. I can repeat it if you don't know, and then I'll ask Arthur to repeat the question.
Okay, so the sheep. Okay, so the question is.
Arthur's gone to Damon that you can answer it. He won't be asked.
Because it's because you're only dealing with sheep here. Sheep can only do two forms of damage, and that's shane and regal. It doesn't have horns, so it can't do keren.
Excellent.
So when it talks about keren, it refers to an ox.
Excellent.
So keren can't be a factor.
Excellent.
In
and what's the question of the
level of damage?
Correct. And what's the question of the Gemara against Rav Mani Bar Patish?
Dada, can't say.
Arthur. I'm unmuting you. Don't worry. You can't get off the hook that quickly. Just give me a sec. Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah. What's the question of the Gemara?
The question of the Gemara is how come a dumb animal you're responsible for with the lesser guarding, and with a more animal you're not?
No, that's not the question.
Is that not the question? Maybe I'm hearing it wrong.
Okay. All right, Kevin, you try.
I didn't say a right student.
From my understanding, it's we've been talking for a couple of minutes. I've already forgotten, but I think basically what it is that why are these Tanoim? No, why are these Tanoim bringing in what's it called? Reference? Why are they bringing in references to keren? Because keren's not related. This is what you were saying. It's not related to this Gemara at all. This particular Gemara is only covering sheep. If it's only or this Mishnah, if it's only covering sheep, there should be no mention of Keren. So these guys, I don't know why they incorporate. It's a good point that you raised. It was a clever question.
Okay, but it's not quite the question, but you're onto it. Kevin started it. Gavin is onto it. Arthur's cooking. So, okay. So, what we've got to do is we've got to rephrase it, guys, just to make sure you all understand. Number one, the question, the statement by Rav Mani Bar Patish is as follows, is that this Mishnah was authorized by Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Why? Let's start off with the question. Let's start off with the statement by Rav Mani Bar Patish. He said this Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Once you can answer that as a building block, we go to the next part.
What does Rabbi Yehuda say? That's
Yeah,
the question.
That's what I'm trying to think.
Then we can. You probably said it to us, and I was just maybe I probably
It's
lost
fine.
focus.
You know what? You guys
said
put in a
said it,
full
and I
day.
didn't-
You're learning Torah. I'm happy. There's no right or wrong. I must tell you something. I admire you guys at the end of a business day to put your head in a shirt. It's not so easy. And I'm happy to just restructure the question so you can enjoy the Gemara. You're here to enjoy it also. So what's the question? Well, Rav Mani Bar Patish is saying this Gemara, this Mishnah goes according to Rav Yehuda. Why?
I don't remember what Rabbi Yehuda said that specifically to him. I remember on the previous stuff, but relating to this Gemara, he's always got a different view completely. Yeah?
All right. Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to share the Mishnah again, because I think if I share the Mishnah on the screen, it's probably a little bit easier because you're not expected to memorize it at all.
I know the content. I don't remember which rabbi said what. That's the problem.
Okay.
Sometimes I do.
So the Mishnah says, one who brought a sheep into the fold and locked the gate before it properly, but it escaped and damaged the property of another, he's not liable to pay for the damage. If, however, he did not lock the gate properly and it escaped and damaged, he's liable to pay. So there's two clues here. The first thing is a fold is not Fort Knox. All you're doing is, what happens is that the animals are contained so they can defecate and their feces will fertilize the ground. And they're kept in a specific space in order to fertilize the ground with their stools because it's high in nitrogen, etc. And then they also eat from that area near there. So then it's an ecosystem. They're eating from this the produce, but their defecation creates the rich soil so the produce can grow back. Now, if I'm putting a fence around, that fence is not Fort Knox, guys. It's temporary. So it's enough to keep the sheep in. And the Gemara already said, what do we mean by properly? We said that properly just means an ordinary guarding against a usual wind. That's all. That's the minimum standard in terms of ordinary circumstances, common circumstances. So therefore, it's considered a lesser guarding. If these sheep were not put into a fold, but put into an iron-bolted stable, for example, with locks and Fort Knox and everything else, that's a superior guarding. So the Mishnah gives a clue that it's a temporary sort of guarding, and it's enough to keep the sheep there because they're not that strong. And therefore, if it escaped and damaged, you're not liable, which means a lesser guarding is allowed. So Rav Mani Bar Patish is saying, look, the Mishnah clearly says a lesser guarding is allowed, and therefore, whose opinion does that go by? It's Rabbi Yehuda in the 45th daf. Why is it Rabbi Yehuda in the 45th daf? Well, very clear. If I share my screen, okay, it says that if an owner tied the ox with a rein, and we're talking about an iron rein, or locked the gate before it properly, but it went out and damaged whether it was Tamu Muad, he is liable. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Okay, so there's liability with when he uses the word properly here. Properly means an ordinary guarding. It's the minimum standard. It's a common guarding. So Rabbi Meir is saying that there's still liability here. An ox with a rein isn't strong enough. It has to be a metal chain, or it has to be a superior guarding. Properly just means properly, meaning you've done your minimum standards, that you're not negligent. But Rabbi Meir says you're negligent, even though it's determined as properly meaning common, under common circumstances. However, Rav Yehuda says if the animal is a tam, he agrees that a lesser guarding or guarding properly, according to minimum standards, makes you liable. It's not good enough. But if it's muad, he's exempt. So if that's the case, in this Gemara that we are on in the 55th daf in the chapter 6 is talking about a sheep, the default position is it's muad. Why? Because, and this is the key point, is that a sheep doesn't attack with its horns. So therefore, there's no such concept as half payment damages for tam and muad. A sheep's got only two different types of damage. A goat eats everything in its sight, or a sheep can trample on things or scratch and itch or something. So only shane and regular left for sheep. Does that make sense? Unlike the 45th daf. So Rav Mani Bar Patesh is being objected by the Gemara, because what's happening is he is saying, no, it's according to Rav Yehuda, because for muad, a lesser guarding is okay, and a lesser guarding is determined as guarding it properly under normal circumstances. And therefore, this Mishnah follows Rav Yehuda's opinion. And the Gemara is arguing with Rav Mani Bar Patesh and saying, no, it's not true. Because here we're talking about sheep and not oxen, and sheep are muad with regards to shane and regel. And who's to say that Rabbi Meir wouldn't agree that in a case of shane or regel, that muad damage with shane and regel, because it's muad from the outset, that a lesser guarding doesn't suffice. And the reason being is the reason Gavin brought up, is that if an animal's owner has been warned multiple times, he loses the leniency of the law. Let me give you one example quickly. Somebody comes to me and the cops say to me, listen, here's a ticket. And they see I've got an outstanding record, and I said to them, listen, I'm a little bit late. I had a medical emergency. I needed to visit somebody in hospital, or whatever the case may be. In that case, they'd either give me a ticket or not, but they wouldn't be too upset. If they pulled over Johan Fillion and he's got 200 outstanding traffic fines and he's never paid it and he owes 100,000, they can arrest him. They're not going to give him a fine because he's a habitual offender. And therefore, somebody whose ox damages habitually, the owner is warned about how dangerous this animal is. And therefore, he doesn't get any leniency on the law about a minimum standard of looking after the animal in ordinary circumstances. This is no ordinary animal. It's no calm animal. And why should he get the leniency of a lesser guarding or a minimal guarding in usual circumstances? Because there's nothing usual about these circumstances with Karen. And therefore, if we're talking about Karen damage, yes, Rabbi Mani Bar Patesh is right. It would have to follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, because this Mishnah is saying for a lesser guarding, you're off the hook with muad. But it's saying here we're talking about sheep. And since we're talking about muad, Rabbi Meir might agree that for shane and regel, a lesser guarding suffices for muad because the animal isn't dangerous. It's not a dangerous animal. It's walking normally. And because it's not a dangerous animal, Rabbi Meir might agree that for those cases of muad, in other words, muad from the outset because it's its nature to walk and eat, then a lesser guarding suffices because it's not a dangerous animal. That's the Gemara's counter-argument to Rav Mani Bar Patesh. Am I making sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Okay, because it says, you can say that if it follows even Rabbi Meir, because he stated his opinion in regard to Keren damage, whereas shane and regel damage are different, for the Torah reduces the level regarding guarding in that particular case. Okay, means Rabbi Meir could agree that in the case of Shane and Reg or damage, even a lesser guarding suffices, because we're talking about sheep. Okay, so I think we're fine to probably stop on this note. We've got 1 minute left, and I've kept it at a low time period. Guys, I don't think it's a race. I think if you understood this, I'm happy. Yeah.
So Damon, so that's why it says lesser guarding, because it's a sheep. It's not gonna. It's slightly risky, but it's not as risky as a moor ox. It's not going to cause the same damage.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I'd say, listen, it's not necessarily the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir might say when an animal is not a dangerous animal in the normal way that it walks and eats and scratches an edge, even though it's moored from the outset, it's okay that it's a lesser guarding, exactly as Kevin said. It's not necessarily only Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. However, for carrying damage, it would have to follow Rabbi Yehuda because the animal's dangerous.
But
Excellent.
I've got a question for you. Sheep, so some sheep do rams, they're sheep, right?
Because of the horn.
Yeah, it's got a horn as well. I know it's like not the same sort of substance, but it's.
So the Hebrew word might refer differently when it talks about a ram with a horn or something like that. It might be a different Hebrew word.
Okay, because I mean, there's domestic sheep and there's sheep that never go bare. They're often very different. I mean, I don't know.